Believe it or not, it is the last full week of summer vacation. I'm Charlie Sykes, and Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, former Subway pitchman Jared Fogle pleads guilty to child sex and child pornography charges. Ryan Braun homers and surpasses Robin Yount's record for Brewer home runs. Milwaukee County Supervisor Mark Borkowski beats State Senator Tim Carpenter for a seat on the Milwaukee Common Council. The Packers unveil plans for a new entertainment complex called the Titletown District near Lambeau Field. And Hillary Clinton's email scandal grows as she dips in the polls. But we start with the latest Marquette poll. Latest numbers raise some red flags for Scott Walker. The presidential candidate gets his lowest approval ratings to date, 39%, and he trails Hillary Clinton here by 10 percentage points in a head-to-head matchup. Walker still leads in the GOP race for president here, while Clinton's lead over Bernie Sanders has shrunk. Another finding? The race between former Senator Russ Feingold and the man who beat him back in 2010 is tightening. Back in April, Russ Feingold, a Democrat, led Republican Ron Johnson 54% to 38%, but that margin has now been cut to 47% to 42%. Joining me on our panel this morning, defense attorney Dan Adams, former state representative Michelle Litchens, political strategist Lynn DeBruin, and media trackers Brian Sickma. Brian, we'll start with you. If you're Scott Walker, are you concerned that you're dropped down to 39% in approval rating in your home state?
I'm not at this point in the game, because I think it's widely known that Scott Walker's not going to be coming back and running for governor again. He's in this presidential race to win it. He's got a future outside of the governor's mansion in Wisconsin, even though he's still working very hard to make sure that we continue to accomplish those reforms that he
why is it so low? Why did it drop? He's never been that low before.
Well, it began to drop because we had the state budget passed. It's a big issue. There's a lot of controversial items in there, a lot of different moving parts that are part of that state budget. And the governor never really sold that. He moved right into that presidential announcement and then pivoted to the national stage.
Okay, Linda Bruin.
Well, I do think it's a problem for him. Yeah. I agree that I don't think he's coming back going to be governor. Yeah. But, the numbers are dropping because the public is fed up with the education cuts, and the job market has not rebounded the way Walker said that, that was a hallmark of his campaign.
Last week, though.
Yeah, but not overall the whole term. And so I think that if Walker became the Republican nominee for president, he at this point would be in actual danger of losing his home state. That's not good. So it sends a bit of a political message nationally with his campaign that's not good.
Yeah, I don't think this is rocket science. I mean, the reality is he's not been around, and if you are not president, if you are not touting your success, if you're not making your case, you are going to see some slippage. So if you don't define yourself, somebody else is going to define you, and all of the other governors, with the exception, I think, of Kasich, who's running for president, are also experiencing this slump in the polls. But again, absence does not make the heart grow fonder in politics. Your take?
I completely agree. I think that his numbers reflect that he hasn't been in the state of Wisconsin. And I think that budget did hurt him in the sense that he was not out there promoting it. He kind of left it to people who didn't write the budget, like the Senate and the Assembly, out there trying to sell his budget, and they didn't necessarily agree with everything in it.
Okay, let's switch to the U.S. Senate race, because the April numbers showed Russ Feingold walking away with this race. Now we have a 5-point race. Your take on this?
Well, absence has made the heart grow fonder for Russ Feingold, and he is still winning. I mean, he's above the margin of error. Yeah. He has the most favorable ratings of any politician polled in that Marquette poll. And Ron Johnson's numbers about who really doesn't have an opinion, he just can't get over that.
Okay, but I think you're missing one of the key points. I think that those early numbers showing this huge margin for Feingold, I think Feingold believed that, and that explains some of the body language, the fact that he's still working in California, the fact that he's breaking one campaign promise after another. There was that sort of a sense that, hey, this is inevitable, this is going to be a cakewalk, and now suddenly you've gone from a, 16-point lead to a 5-point lead?
Also had an onslaught of conservative negative stories about it.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, also, but when you look at who Ron Johnson is, he is not your typical politician. He actually was elected to do something, went out to Washington, D.C. to try to change things. So people didn't see him perhaps as much in Wisconsin, so he needs to boost his name.
Okay, but Dan Adams does make the point, though, that, for a guy who's a United States Senator, a lot of people don't have an opinion. They don't know him. Why is that the case? Right?
Because he hasn't been here blowing his own or tooting his own horn. He's been out in Washington, D.C. trying to solve real problems. And I think when people find out what he has been doing, the 38% who don't know who Ron Johnson is, they're gonna be behind him.
on that?
Well, Charlie, I do think that it's going to come down to is people are going to have to get reintroduced to Ron Johnson. He's going to reintroduce himself in the campaign trail. They're also going to be reintroduced to Russ Feingold. This is a guy who's basically done some kind of cool things since he left the Senate. Now people are going to come back, focus on him. As Dan mentioned, there's been some stories that are broken. Those stories will continue. This is not over yet. Nobody should be taking this race for granted.
Look, if you have a guy who's been out of the state for as many years as Russ Feingold has, for him to be where he is now, much less back in April, over a sitting U.S. senator, that's a problem. And Ron Johnson's got a way to go.
Where did the 11% go?
Well, the bottom line is I think that was past, first of all, I think that was an inflated result. I didn't buy the results back then. I thought this is just way too good. And if Feingold bottom, he should not have.
Well, I think two things, and Dan Adams has changed his tune on this because you pointed out that they were recycling an old discarded shoe as a candidate.
Stand by that.
No, there is that, but also I think that this is a real problem for Russ Feingold because he had an image of being Mr. Clean, Mr. Campaign Finance Reform. So these stories that you mentioned, and they're not all coming from conservatives, they're coming from the mainstream media, and they are self-inflicted, would suggest that he, Hollywood Russ is a world-class hypocrite. I mean, when you make a promise on your garage door on campaign finance, and then you go, that was then, this is now. When you rail against honoraria, and then you pocket the honoraria. Now, that would not be good for most politicians, but if you are Russ Feingold, and you have been so sanctimonious for so many years, and your record is otherwise so thin, that's going to hurt him.
You got to be careful about doing the flip-flop card, because you could say that about Scott Walker and a lot of his campaign positions he's taking.
Oh, I'm
and
not
a lot of politicians.
No.
So if flip-flopping on campaign promises kills a candidate, then all these guys would be out of the field.
This is more specific than that. This is more specific because this is the issue of Mr. Clean deciding that that these rules don't apply to him and breaking promises. So I think that's different.
When facts on the ground change, so should your response.
Oh my goodness! What? And my client was nowhere around. What has your glass half full? What has your glass half empty? Let's go around the table. We'll start with the criminal defense attorney
Russ
here.
has an alibi. Well, my glass is half empty because this week, because the city of Milwaukee is out $13,000 because the city's Fire and Police Commission broke state open records laws by refusing to turn over documents to the Milwaukee Police Association, who are receiving that money, that $13,000, as a settlement. But my glass is half full because the Police Association just gave city politicians a needed reminder about the importance of open and transparent government, a lesson that will benefit all taxpayers in the long term.
Michelle Litchens.
My glass is half full because a federal judge ordered the FBI to try to recover more of Hillary Clinton's deleted emails. It is half empty because we are never likely to find the real emails about Benghazi.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my glass is half empty because last week President Carter announced he has stage 4 cancer that is quickly spreading. My glass is half full because in his press conference, President Carter displayed his humor, extraordinary grace, and faith, which reminded us, without even trying, of what an extraordinary man he is.
Brian Sikma.
My glass is half empty because the Community Relations Director for the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Everett Mitchell, said Tuesday night that shoplifting isn't really a crime and those that commit it should be allowed to get away with it. My glass is half full because Media Trackers was there to get the video of the controversial statements. Visit MediaTrackers.org to watch.
Well, my glass is half full because the Green Bay Packers unveiled a dramatic new Titletown district, which will include a 4-diamond hotel, hundreds of thousands of square feet of housing, retail, and office space. And they are not asking for a dime of taxpayers' support. It will be entirely funded by the private sector. So wait, no, my glass is actually completely full this week. Next on Sunday Insight, how low is too low for your grocery prices? In Wisconsin, it's actually against the law to sell products below a certain price. It is called the minimum markup law, and newcomer Meijer grocery stores are being hit with complaints from competitors for, well, giving consumers bargains. A 2-liter bottle of Mountain Dew for 69 cents, 25 ounces of Buffalo chicken strips for $3.99. At least one unnamed competitor has filed a complaint with the state accusing Meijer of, quote, selling well below cost to attract patronage to the new store and to divert trade from competitors. And that's supposed to be a bad thing, Linda Bruin?
Well, in Wisconsin since 1939, it's been a bad thing. We have a minimum markup law, not only on that type of retail stores, but also on gasoline. And you know, back in 2009, this was the law was ruled unconstitutional, and Governor Doyle, by a federal judge, and Governor Doyle and Republicans and Democrats alike, legislators said that's great, but they dropped the ball because in November 2010 was the governor's election, and by that time an appeals court, a federal appeals court, overturned the original decision. So Republicans in late 2010, early 2011 kind of dropped the ball by not then going around and legislatively repealing it.
Okay, so Republicans have been in charge for how long here? Why is it still on the books?
I think they've been doing a lot of other things, but its time has come, and this should actually be repealed. We actually only have a minimum markup on gasoline, cigarette tax, or cigarettes and alcohol. There isn't a minimum markup, but you just can't sell below cost for all other products in Wisconsin. And there's only about 18 or 24 other states that actually have that kind of requirement. So it's antiquated. Now you can buy things on the internet from anywhere. I think it's just changed commerce so much that we need to get rid of it.
I think there's agreement here. I wonder if the grocery store may have blown the whistle on itself and said, we're willing to break the law to get you savings.
This is not exactly, you make an interesting point, this is not exactly the worst possible publicity. They go, do you know what they're doing? They are actually offering bargains. What do you think about that? You know, they actually got me to list some of their prices, which are of course against the law. Brian Sykes.
You know, Charlie, it's an antiquated and outdated law because this is price fixing. I mean, if you remember in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, there were all sorts of talk about the need to investigate, gasoline retailers and all these places because of price gouging. Now here in Wisconsin, we're saying, well, no, you can't get too good of a deal because the government knows best.
Okay, but if they do not repeal this, I think it'll be another indication that you have certain special interests that manage. I mean, we know the power of the Tavern League when it comes to drunk driving. We know the petroleum marketers have opposed this in the past, but this ought to be a 2-inch putt for the conservative legislature.
It's going to be a challenge for a lot of legislators because they all go to local grocery stores, and there's a good chance they know those owners. They go to gas stations, there's a good chance they know those owners as well. So you are affecting a lot of local businesses. I'm not saying it's good.
They also know a lot of people who shop there and who buy things. Now, you may not want to hear it, but we will tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Let's start with you, Dan Adams.
My advice is to State Senator Chris Larson, who says he's being approached to run for Milwaukee County Executive. My advice, just do it. Let's see how far your highly divisive and ideological style of politics goes. My bet, not far.
Michelle Litchens.
To whomever chooses the presidential debate moderators, please do not listen to the petitions to hire Jon Stewart for the job. The last thing our country needs is a comedian who will make fools of both of our presidential candidates. They do enough of that by themselves already.
Linda Bruin.
Well, after losing their casino bid, the Menominee tribe is trying to find other ways to make money, including possibly legalizing the use, growth, and sale of marijuana. My advice is that they should take responsible precautions and then go ahead and legalize it.
Brian Sigma.
Well, my unsolicited advice is to Governor Scott Walker, whose presidential campaign has announced a reset as it enters a new phase. Whatever you and the other GOP presidential candidates do, don't try to out-Trump Donald Trump in an attempt to get attention.
Well, there's a little bit of overlap here. My advice is for Republicans on immigration. You don't need to pander to Donald Trump. There are solid, defensible ideas for dealing with illegal immigration that do not involve rounding up millions of people and deporting them. Don't embrace the impractical, inhumane, and ugly vision he's selling. And I'm talking to you, Scott Walker. Next on Sunday Insight, what do you think of every kid getting a trophy for participating? An NFL player started a big conversation about that. Hear what our panel thinks next. If your kid plays sports, you know about them. Participation trophies. Everybody wins, everybody gets one. Well, last week, Pittsburgh Steelers linebacker James Harrison reignited a debate over the feel-good rewards when he announced on Instagram that he was returning 2 of the trophies that his 2 young sons had gotten. His point, trophies should actually be earned. This is what he wrote. I'm sorry that I'm not sorry for believing that everything in life should be earned, and I'm not about to raise 2 boys to be men by making them believe they are entitled to something just because they tried their best, because sometimes your best is not enough, and that should drive you to want to do better, not cry and whine until somebody gives you something to shut you up and keep you happy. So, Michelle Litchens, mean dad or good point?
Oh, perfect point. Our country is thirsting for something like this. And thank goodness it's a professional football player who came out and said this, because there are so many athletic parents of young children saying, my child deserves to be recognized for something. And our country needs to stop this. We need to become competitive again, and we need to reward people for success.
Okay, but is there any really harm that's done? I mean,
yes,
when you have young kids who can go home and say, Mommy, look, I got a trophy.
Your trophy means absolutely nothing if you didn't earn something. These kids need to work hard to earn that trophy instead of just getting something for showing up.
Okay, Dan Adams. You strike me as a kid who's got like lots of participation trophies.
And I'm waiting for my medal from this show.
That's right. The wall of Dan, right? No.
There is actually an adult version of this in government where we have rampant seniority, not a merit-based approach to rewarding public employees.
I thought you were going to say socialism.
Where someone is the last in and they're the first out, and that's destroyed our public schools in this country. That mentality of any teacher who comes the next year immediately gets a pay raise, and not based on what they're doing in the classroom.
Okay, but from just a parenting point of view, James Harrison actually has an interesting story, because he was he had to scrap, and he played in NFL Europe for a long time, and he's one of the guys saying, look, you know what, you have to teach kids how to lose at one point. Simply by bubble wrapping them all the time doesn't really prepare them to be able to deal with adversity.
You learn more from those times you lose and those big disappointments that you have than from the times you win, and that sets you up for the success down the road. Participation trophy is just being able to wear the uniform and getting on the team. Now go out and actually earn something. I mean, kids should be taught from a young age there are rewards for success and there are penalties for failure, and this is why you should strive for success.
Linda Braun.
The only part of this that I disagree with is, well, first of all, you should get participation certificates, trophies for winning. But the part I disagree with is he brought his kids into an adult issue. If he didn't like this, he should have gone to the adults in the league and tried to fix it there. Taking a trophy away from a 6-year-old who's not old enough to really understand why it's being taken away, I think is a bit inappropriate. I think adults need to deal with adult issues and not bring the kids into it.
What was interesting, and I do think it's important to make distinctions between ages. If you're handing it out to kindergarten kids, I think it's kind of no harm, no foul. One of the kids was 6 years old, but on the other hand, on the other hand, here's a guy who is taking his job as parent very, very seriously, and he's doing something that I think a lot of parents sometimes forget, which is their job is not to entertain their kid right now, make them their best friends. It's to prepare their child for the kind of adult that they're going to be. How do you teach kids to strive to be better? And and this whole idea that just do your best, it's good enough. The reality is that sometimes you have to up your game. Sometimes you have to do a better job. It's an interesting argument. What is it that you don't get? Let's go around the table. Dan Adams, you're first.
I don't get how the Milwaukee County Ethics Board dismissed a complaint against Supervisor John Wyshan for spending $4,700 on political direct mail, a charge that was as clear as day, especially after Wyshan screamed profanities at the board. Yikes.
Michelle Litchens.
What I don't get is why anyone would think that if they post personal information on a website looking for an extramarital affair, that it wouldn't ultimately be made public for the world to see.
Linda Braun.
Governor Walker predicted his Wisconsin poll numbers would rebound after the budget was signed. His approval ratings are the worst they've been in 3 years. I don't get why Walker doesn't get that he's in trouble and why he's in trouble back home.
Brian Sikma.
What I don't get is why any Republican candidate for president would think mass deportation of illegal immigrants is a good idea. Not only is that plan counter to conservative ideas, it would doom Republicans to a demographic demise they could never overcome.
Well, which one of Hillary Clinton's genius staffers thought it was a good idea to dress her in an orange jumpsuit for that disastrous press conference on the emails? Optics, people. Orange is the new black. Next on Sunday Insight, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Dan Adams, you are first.
Recent announcements by manufacturer Martara Instruments, who will be expanding and adding jobs, the Couture high-rise being green-lighted, and the Royal Enfield Motorcycle Company locating their U.S. headquarters in the Third Ward show the city of Milwaukee is revving up and is this week's winner. My loser is State Senator Tim Carpenter, who was defeated in a special election for city alderman. In 2004, he lost a race for Congress, and in 2012, lost a race for City of Milwaukee treasurer. Sorry, Tim. 3 strikes. You're out.
Michelle Lichens.
My winners are all of the young men and women, including my son, who finished their plebe summer at the United States Naval Academy last week. Their training was physically and emotionally exhausting, and I know our country will be in great hands when these young leaders graduate in 4 years. My losers are Racine Unified School Board members Dennis Weiser and Julie McKenna, who secretly left the board meeting Thursday, leaving the board without a quorum, which was required to vote on a wage increase for teachers. The union must teach all of their elected lackeys to secretly leave meetings if you don't get your way.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my winner is Khaled Al-Assad, an 82-year-old university professor who spent his life preserving Syrian antiquities. Last Tuesday, he was publicly beheaded for refusing to pledge allegiance to ISIS and refusing, under ISIS interrogation, to reveal the location of archaeological treasures that terrorists thought were in the city. For my loser, sadly, I have to agree with the Washington Post, who gave Hillary Clinton their Worst Week in Washington award. On Tuesday, Clinton quickly ended a news conference after she got into a heated back and forth with reporters over questions about her private email server.
Brian Sikma.
My winner of the week is Iran. The nation is receiving $150 billion in sanctions relief and an influx of outside investors thanks to a nuclear deal that allows them to inspect their own facilities and places only the weakest of restrictions on their nuclear research program. My loser of the week is any investor who chooses to invest in Iran. When the radical regime there rose to power in the 1970s, it restricted and ultimately cut off foreign investors, leaving them with nothing to show for their hard work. The Iran deal is bad for the U.S., and Iran itself is a bad investment for global investors.
Well, I mentioned earlier my winner, the Green Bay Packers, for their Titletown district plan, exactly what you would expect and hope for from the NFL's classiest franchise. Loser, I agree with Dan, State Senator Tim Carpenter, who maybe wishes he'd stayed in Illinois after he ran away. Last week, the veteran senator found out he cannot even get elected alderman in his own hometown. Ouch. Thanks for joining us. Today for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.